Hello and welcome, my name is Charlie Roscoe, and one of the questions I get asked the most during my streams is, are you on controller or wheel? I'm always on a wheel, so I'm not quite sure what would happen if I said I was on controller. Perhaps it's a way of people determining if I'm serious enough about sim racing. Perhaps if I was on a controller, people would click away because lol noob. Regardless of the reason, there is one undeniable divide within nearly all racing sim communities. People on controllers and people on wheels. The general consensus is that racing is much harder on a controller, meaning controller users are typically slower and more likely to make mistakes. I asked during one of my streams if I should do a controller versus wheel video, and the response was yes. So let's get to it. What you've been watching is obviously a lap of Bathurst using my wheel. I have a Logitech G29 wheel and my old G27 gear shifter, which to be honest, I don't really use all that much. I wasn't too focused on doing a leaderboard topping time here, I just wanted to pump out a nice clean lap that I could compare my best controller lap to. After this I thought, yep, that's gone well. So I turned all the extra lighting and cameras off and set up the controller part. Only that didn't quite go the way I thought it would, but I'll come back to that in a minute. I'll quickly touch on my racing background so that you guys have a better idea of where I'm coming from and what experiences I have. I, like most people, started racing on a controller, and I've done a lot of racing on a number of different games over the years. But about 5 or 6 years ago, I did something that really got me hooked on sim racing and turned it into an actual hobby of mine. Myself and a couple of mates, one of whom is Willie, you may know from some of my live streams and the Flag to Flag podcast I host, found ourselves in Sydney, cruising around Darling Harbour looking for something to do. We stumbled across a simulator racing store called Race Centre that was set up with a heap of rigs running R-Factor. We decided to pay up and jump on and have a few races. Needless to say, we loved it. We came straight home and bought a copy of R-Factor and set about finding some established leagues and joining their championships. The only thing was, we didn't have wheels. Everyone else we raced against were on steering wheels, however we were only racing on Xbox 360 controllers plugged into our PCs. Believe it or not, we got pretty good. We moved up the field, raced clean and hard, and were getting consistent top 10s out of a field of around 30 people. We would secretly chuckle when people would have a rant on TeamSpeak about how bad people on controllers are. Or if a random person dropped in and they sucked, everyone would instantly throw controller accusations at them. We never told them we weren't on a wheel, and we were never suspected of being on a controller. The point of me telling you all this is to show that you can definitely get good on a controller, and for a while, I was pretty handy with one. That's kind of a pun if you think about it. Back to this lap on controller not going the way I thought it would. If you weren't paying attention to my time at the end of the steering wheel lap, I did a 2:04.1. Not a bad lap, I thought, so I plugged my controller in and much to my surprise, I managed a 2:03.6. I couldn't believe I managed to go so much faster using a controller that I haven't done any racing with for years. So I suppose if I look at the pros and cons of a controller versus a steering wheel, one thing that really surprised me was how good the brake and throttle controls were on a controller. You probably wouldn't think so, but the R2 and L2 button are very progressive, they're smooth, they've got a good spring in it, and they're actually quite easy to modulate the throttle, which is very important. You don't want lots of wheel spin, and you can modulate the brake as well. Obviously that's also very important because you want to give it a heap of brake when you first start braking. Make sure that the wheels don't lock and then you back the brake off a little bit. It surprised me how easy it was to do that on a controller and how comfortable I felt. Of course, the area that the controller lacks is in steering progression. There's no force feedback through that left thumbstick and you just sort of feel like you're stabbing at it. You can see my left thumb's not moving overly aggressively. I wasn't twisting the controller too much. I was really trying to be smooth and give it little steering inputs. But the reality is it's very, very difficult. Without that feedback, you don't really know what your wheels are doing. You're basing it on visual cues, and if you see that you've turned in too sharp, you kind of have to back off. It's a little bit awkward to do on a controller. The other thing I'll say, whilst 2:03.6 is certainly not a bad lap time, and in fact surprised me, I went faster than my first steering wheel lap, it is less consistent. I had a few laps where I was bouncing off walls, I was doing some nasty stuff, and that's through lack of practice as well, because I haven't been playing any racing games with a controller for a long time. So with a bit of practice, if you tidied that up, I definitely think there is potential in a controller. So if you're watching this video going, is it even worth trying hard in a Gran Turismo, for example, or any racing simulator with a controller? I think I've proven the answer is yes. If you did a little bit more practice than I have here and you cleaned yourself up in terms of consistency, kept yourself off the wall. I really do think there's potential in the controller. You can do quick lap times and you can battle it out. So whilst the steering on a wheel is much better, which is to be expected, that's what it's built for, don't lose hope if you're on a controller. Don't feel like there's no point until you get a steering wheel. Steering wheel's probably a little bit better, but don't feel like you've got no hope, because you really do. Of course, having set a faster time on the controller, I did have to get back out immediately and do another couple of laps on my steering wheel. Luckily for me, it only took 2 laps and I managed to drop a 2:02.6, which is a very good lap time, and I'm very happy with that. So I have redeemed myself, and people don't have to laugh at me now because I was slower on a steering wheel. It's not slower, it is still faster, but there's lots of potential on the controller. Hopefully you've got something from this video. Hopefully you have enjoyed it. It's my first time doing this real life and gaming type of split here you see on the screen. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. If you have, please leave a like. It helps me out a bunch. Hit subscribe to see more of my videos. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.